Good day, everyone. I'm Maria Angelica Dela Cruz, and today I will tackle the topic that assigned to me, which is the genetic approach of Gordon Alport, motivation and personality. But before we proceed to his theory, let us know the basic information about Gordon Alport. Gordon Willard Alport is born on November 11, 1987 in Montezuma, Indiana. He was the youngest children in four. They were all sons. His mother was a teacher and his father was a salesman who decided to become a doctor. He died on October 9, 1967 at Cambridge, Massachusetts. He's also an APA awardee for distinguished scientific contributions to psychology. Now that we know his basic information, let us know, alamin naman natin kung ano siya as a psychologist. Alport was one of the pioneering psychologists, referred as one of the founders of personality psychology. And alamin naman natin yung buhay niya step by step, yung mga naranasan niya na nag-reflect and nakatulong para makakome up siya sa theories na pag-aaralan natin today. Growing up, as what I said a while ago, siya yung pinakabata sa apat na magkakapatid na lalaki na anak ng isang teacher at ng isang salesman na gustong maging doktor. When the elder Alport was studying in medical school in Baltimore, they were financially unstable. That pushed him to smuggle drugs from Canada into the United States just to support his family. And then nung inano na ng law or hinaharap na siya kasi nga bawal sa batas na magtinda ng drugs, tumakas siya by jumping over the fence and dinala niya yung family niya into Indiana. Gordon Alport believed that his father's first case was his birth. And lumaki siya sa household wherein there's a lot of restriction. Maybe it's because his mother was a religious person. They were not allowed to wear bright clothes, colorful clothes. They are not allowed to wear jewelries. They are not allowed to smoke, to dance, to sing, and to play cards. And that's how he grew up. That's mostly his childhood. And also Alport opened that he felt isolated and rejected while growing up. He said that too young to be a playmate to his older brother, Alport was isolated from children outside the family as well. He quote, "I fashioned my own circle of activities." He also said that I suffered agonies on the playground. I never really got on with my brothers. They didn't like me and they weren't kind and I couldn't possibly compete with them. They were all a little more masculine in type than I was. He opened that he was more skillful towards words and writings than being athletic or in sports. And because of that, isolation and rejection, sinabi niya sa kanyang theory na psychological healthy adults are unaffected by childhood events na hindi nakaka-apekto yung naranasan natin sa childhood kung ano tayo sa magiging future as long as we're psychologically healthy. And then after that, he felt inferior towards his brother, which is Floyd. Floyd is the same as him, a psychology. Floyd is a psychology. Growing up, lagi niyang sinusundan yung yapak ng kanyang kapatid. When Floyd studied psychology, he studied in Harvard, so Gordon also studied in Harvard. But then, to know the individualistic, to attempt to emulate Floyd may have threatened Gordon's sense of identity. To assert his individuality, Alport may have been motivated to refute his identification with Floyd by declaring his personality theory that his adult motives and interests were independent of childhood's feeling. Sinasabi niya na hindi nakadepende yung childhood feelings natin kung ano tayo ngayon sa pagtanda natin. Hindi konektado ang feelings or napagdaanan ng batang tayo kung ano tayo as an adult. Next is college years. Tulad nga ng sinabi ko kanina, nag-aral siya sa Harvard, same as his brother, Floyd, and nag-take up din siya ng psychology. Next is Alport meets Freud. Sigmund Freud. Sigmund Freud was very famous name naman towards psychology students and a very, very important name in psychology with lot of his contributions. Nakilala niya si Alport and he mentioned that it was a very awkward meeting, and because of that, meron siyang mga bagay na naisip at naka-come up sa kanyang theory, which we will tackle later. And becoming a success, and even though he felt inferior, yun nga, naging successful din naman siya in the future, which is, ngayon nga, nakikita natin na as of now, his theories were still helpful as of today. Next is Alport. He rejected two dominant schools of thought, which is Sigmund Freud's psychoanalysis and John B. Watson's behaviorism. He is remembered for his contribution to the trait theory of personality that stressed the importance of individual differences. Because of Alport, Gordon Alport, personality became a respectable topic towards psychology. The formal and systematic study of personality was only recognized by psychology when Alport published his book entitled Personality, a Psychological Interpretation in 1937. This book became a classic and standard in studying personality. Yung book niya, lagi na siyang ginagamit pag pinag-uusapan natin ang pag-aaral sa personality. Gordon Alport not only helped to bring the personality in the limelight in the world of psychology, but he's also the one who formulated the theory of personality development in which traits play a prominent role. Next is Alport challenges Freud. Nasabi ko kanina na kapag nag-meet na sila dati, and Gordon Alport was really not fond of Sigmund Freud's psychoanalysis, which is, nasabi ko na kanina, which is he rejected two school of thoughts. And he mentioned some of psychoanalysis, he mentioned some of Freud's psychoanalysis na he was disapproved of. First is he disapproved of Freud's notion about the unconscious forces. He said that the emotionally healthy people function rationally and consciously aware and in control of many of the forces that motivate them. According to Alport, the unconscious is important only in the behavior of neurotic or disturbed people. Sinasabi dito na hindi naman daw if you're a normal person or you're a healthy, you're an adult, you're an psychological healthy adult, hindi importante or hindi ka nire-reflect ng unconscious forces mo. This is only important to the people who are not normal in the norms of society. He also known that he censored a belief of Freud that our past experiences will determine our present. Alport was really not fan of historical determinism. Alport says that we as a person is not a prisoner of childhood's conflicts and past experiences. Sabi niya, hindi tayo reflect ng kung ano tayo ng bata sa kung ano tayo ngayon as a person. Kunyari kung nung bata ka, masungit ka or maldito ka, doesn't mean na paglaki ng isang bata is ganun pa rin siya. Yun yung sinasabi niya. Sinasabi niya na guided more by the present and by view of our future. Na ang buhay is nakadepende kung paano natin view yung future natin and kung ano tayo ngayon sa present. And lastly, he questioned Freud's belief in collecting data from abnormal personalities. Nasabi niya dito na bakit ka mag-gather ng information sa mga taong wala masyadong na hindi capable enough to gather information. Parang hindi naman sila capable enough para makakuha ka ng information. Then, why are you collecting data from them? Sabi nila dapat kung magkukulik ka ng data, you choose as person that are normal. Hindi pareho ang taong abnormal and normal. The same as hindi pareho ang pagkuha ng pag-collect ng data sa animal and sa person. So, Alport emphasizes that we should collect data to normal people. Next is Alport emphasizes that the uniqueness of personality is defined by each person's traits. And how is that? Before suggesting his own meaning of personality, Alport reviewed 50 definitions of personality. Meron siyang published na book entitled Pattern and Growth in Personality, and he says that personality is the dynamic organization within the individual of those psychophysical systems that determine characteristic, behavior, and thought. And now, himahimay natin kung ano ba yung sinabi niya, kung ano bang meaning ng personality para sa kanya. Dynamic organization. Even though personality change continually, the changes that is happening is organized in and form. Sabi niya, nga, ang personality hindi naman stagnant, hindi naman kung ano ka ngayon, ikaw pa rin bukas. Sabi nga, personality changes from time to time. You yesterday was not the same person as you are today. So sinabi niya, and even though pabago-bago ang personality ng tao, yung pagbabago ng isang tao ng personality, hindi siya magulo. Yung pagbabago natin is very organized, and hindi siya yung basta na lang tinapon na kunyari ngayon masama ako, mabait ka agad. No, it's not like that. So lang yun ang sinabi niya. That was magulo. But yeah. But parang sinasabi niya lang na yung pagbabago na nangyayari sa atin, organize siya. Hindi siya biglaan. Parang continually, nagbabago ka, pero hindi siya yung biglang, nagbago ka agad. Ganun. And next is psychophysical. Sinasabi ni Alport na personality is composed of psychological and biological. And hindi pwedeng psychological lang, hindi pwedeng physical lang. Dapat both psychological and physical should work as a unit para masabi na, ito, personality to. And then next, determine. He says that the facet Alport means that all facets of personality activate or direct specific behaviors and thought. And the phrase characteristic behavior and thought means that everything we do and think is characteristic or typical of us. Na kung ano yung inaakto natin is tayo yun. Kung ano yung ginagawa natin, tayo yun. Kunyari, kung ganito nag-act, kasi ikaw yan. And the people perceive you as that kasi alam nilang ganyan ka umakto. Lahat ng ginagawa mo, lahat ng sinasabi mo, reflect kung ano ka talaga as a person. Reflect of who you are as a person. Next is the roles of heredity and environment. Alport stated that we reflect both our heredity and our environment. Heredity, provide niya yung mga raw materials ng personality tulad ng physics, ng intelligence and temperament, and may then be shaped, expanded, or limited by the conditions of our environment. The heredity, syempre alam naman natin ang gagaling yan sa mga genes ng ating nanay at tatay. Kunyari, you, as a person, kunyari ako, I'm not that tall of a person because both of my parents hindi naman katangkaran. That was raw materials. That was I get that because of heredity. Me as a person, nag-develop ako. Nakadepende na siya on my environment. Nakadepende na siya on how I was. Nakadepende na kung paano ako na-influensyahan ng environment ko. habang lumalaki. In this way, Alport invokes both personal and situational variables to indicate the importance of both genetics and learning. He also emphasizes that kahit kunyari, for example, kambal, pareho man kayo ng itsura, ng physics, pareho kayong matangkad, parehong maputi, parehong straight ang buhok, your personality and characteristic are different because the only same thing that you have is your physical that came off from the only same thing that you have is from your heredity. And yung environment nyo is different kahit sa isang bahay lang kayo tumira. Hindi kahit anong mangyari, hindi pwede kahit magkambal kayo, kahit magkamukha, hindi magiging pareho ang ugali ng hindi magiging magkapareho ang ugali ng dalawang tao. Sinasabi nga ni Alport na every individual is unique and every individuals have different personality and no one is the same. He said that there are two distinct personality for two stages of life. Alport considered personality as discrete or discontinuous. People aren't just different or distinct from one another. Individuals, on the other hand, are no longer what they once were. People have two personas according to Alport, one for childhood and one for adulthood. Instincts and primitive biological drive the juvenile personality, whereas psychological elements drive the mature personality. At dito naman sinasabi niya na kung ano tayo as a child, hindi siya same kung ano tayo or kung ano magiging tayo as a adult. Kunyari, for example nga, tulad ng sinabi ko kanina, kung ako as a child, I'm very stubborn or mainitin ang ulo, hindi nun i-reflect kung ano ba ako in the future, kung ano ba ako as adult. My childhood persona is different as what I am as my adult persona. Ina-emphasize niya lang ng hindi nire-reflect ng childhood mo kung ano ka in the future. Sinasabi niya na magkaiba ang dalawa. And he emphasizes the more that we mature, the more na nagiging yung personality natin is mas nagiging maayos. Thank you.
I am Kimberly T. Devera of BS Psychology 3A, and I'm here to report about Gordon Alport's personality traits, motivation, the healthy adult personality, questions about human nature, and assessment in Alport's theory. Personality traits or personal disposition. According to Alport, trait is a distinguishing characteristic that guide behavior. Trait is a subject to social, environmental, and cultural influences, and it is consistent in enduring ways of reacting to our environment. According to him, personality traits is considered to be predispositions to respond in the same or similar manners to different kinds of stimuli. He summarized the characteristics of traits as follows. Personality traits is real and everyone has it. They are theoretical, construct made to account for behavior. It means that personality traits exist within each of us. Trait determine or cause behavior. Personality traits do not arise only in response to certain stimuli. They motivate us to seek appropriate stimuli and they interact with the environment to produce behavior. Traits can be demonstrated empirically through observing behavior. By observing behavior over time, we can infer the existence of traits in the consistency of a person's responses to the same or similar stimuli. Traits are interrelated, they may overlap even though they represent different characteristics. For example, aggressiveness and hostility are distinct but related traits and are frequently observed to occur together in a person's behavior. And traits vary with the situation. For example, a person may display a certain or specific trait in a certain situation, and they may also display a different kind of trait or opposite of the trait that they have already shown in another kind of situation. Initially, Alport proposed two types of trait, individual and common traits. Individual traits is the one that defines an individual's character and it is unique to each person. While common trait is a trait that is shared by a number of people, such as members of a culture, and is likely to change over time as social standards and value constantly change. Personal disposition. Alport later on relabeled his terminology common traits as trait and individual trait as personal disposition to avoid confusion later on. Personal disposition had been disseminated into three traits: cardinal, central, and secondary traits, as according to Alport, our personal disposition do not all have the same intensity or significance. Cardinal trait. Alport described this trait as a ruling passion, a powerful force that dominates behavior. It is pervasive and influential that it touches every aspect of a person's life. And not everyone has a ruling passion, and those who do may not display it in every situation. Central trait. It best describes our behavior. This trait has 5 to 10 themes. And these are the kinds of characteristics that we would mention when discussing a friend's personality or writing a letter of recommendation. Secondary trait. This trait is described as weak according to Alport, that only a close friend would notice an evidence of them. And it appears much less consistently than cardinal and central trait. Motivation, what we strive for. Alport emphasized the influence of a person's present situation, not only in his personality theory, but also in his view of motivation. What we want and what we strive for are the keys to understanding our behavior. It is the forces that motivated us early in life that become autonomous or independent of their original circumstances. The only way to understand adult motives, Alport stressed, is to investigate why people behave as they do today. Alport believed that the central problem for any personality theory is how it treats the concept of motivation. Thus, Alport attempted to explain the present in terms of the future rather than in terms of the past. Functional autonomy. Alport's concept of functional autonomy proposes that the motives of mature, emotionally healthy adults are not functionally connected to the prior experiences in which they initially appeared. Alport proposed two levels of functional autonomy. Perseverative functional. This is the action once serve a purpose but they no longer do and are at too basic and low a level to be considered as an integral part of personality. It is concerned with such behaviors as addiction and repetitive physical actions, such as habitual ways of performing some routine, everyday task. The behaviors continue to persevere on their own without any external reward. While appropriate functional autonomy, this is a more important functional autonomy than the latter. It is essential to understanding adult motivation. The word appropriate derives from the term proprium, Alport's term for ego or self. It is the motives that are unique to each individual. The ego determines which motives will be maintained and which will be discarded. We retain motives that enhance our self-esteem or self-image.
Good day everyone, my name is Cadelina and here's the continuation of the report of the genetic approach of Gordon Alport in motivation and personality. Alport chose the term proprium for the self or ego because he rejected the word self and ego because of the diversity of meanings ascribed to them by other theorists. The proprium includes those aspects of personality that are distinctive and thus appropriate to our individual emotional life.
Proprium, it is a concept of self which is consistent, unique, and central in individual life na nakakapag-influences sa personality development natin. As you can see on the table, the bodily me, the infants receive sensory impressions from external environment which they automatically and reflexively reacts to that kind of environment with no ego to mediate between stimulus and response. That's why Gordon Alport described them as a selfish, destructive, pleasure-seeking, and dependent. Gordon Alport also called them as a unsocialized sort because they possess a little of what could be called a personality. So, sa self-identity stage naman, it is marked by a sense of continuity of one's identity. So, children realize that they still remain the same people despite na nagbago na yung kanilang katawan. So, dito na yung pag-enhance ng kanilang learning sa kanilang pangalan, then nadidistinct na nila yung sarili nila sa iba. So, sa self-esteem stage naman, pag yun ay na-develop, kaya na nilang mag-accomplish ng mga bagay sa sarili niya. So, they are motivated to do things and explore and manipulate objects that sometimes can be destructive. So, ba't ko nasabi na sometimes can be destructive? Kasi, once na napigilan yung pag-explore nila, yung motivation nila na mag-explore ng mga bagay-bagay, ang mangyayari kasi is mapapalitan yung motivation nila into humiliation and anger. So, sa may extension of self stage naman, it involves the growing of awareness of object and people in their environment. So, kaya na nila mag-identify ng mga objects and belongings na sa tingin nila ay sa kanila. Like, pag nandun sila sa bahay nila, sinasabi nila my house, or kaya kapag nasa school sila, pag sinasabi nila my school, or kaya pag kasama nila yung parents nila, alam na sabihin yung my parents. Sa my self-image naman, it incorporating on how children see and would like to see themselves. So, dito pumapasok yung pag-aware ng bata kung yung behavior nila sa expectation ng mga magulang nila. So, this actual and ideal self-image develop from interaction with the parents who make the child aware of their expectations and of the extent to which the children is satisfying or failing to satisfy those expectations. Next is yung self as a rational upper stage. Children begins to realize fully that they have a rational capacity to find the solutions to life's problem so that they can cope effectively with reality demands. Sa appropriate striving stage naman, adolescents begin to formulate a plan and goals for their future. That's why adolescent knows that their future must follow a plan. And with that, they search for identity and includes the experimentation common to adolescents before making a long-range commitment. So, lastly is yung adulthood stage. So, dito yung pumapasok yung pagiging independent ng mga tao. That's why we are free from influence or control from another person. Dito din pumapasok yung kakaroon natin ng sariling pag-iisip and pag-support natin sa sarili natin.
Healthy adult personality. In Alport's view, the healthy personality changes and grows from being a biologically dominated organism in infancy to a mature psychological organism in adulthood. We noted that if our childhood needs for affection and security have been met, the proprium will develop satisfactorily. The adult personality grows out of childhood and is no longer dominated or determined by childhood drives. Alport describes 6 criteria for normal, mature, emotionally healthy adult personalities. Number 1, mature adult extend their sense of self to people and activities beyond the self. Number 2, mature adults relate warmly to other people, such as exhibiting intimacy, compassion, and tolerance. Number 3, mature adults' high degree of self-acceptance helps them to achieve emotional security. Number 4, mature adults hold a realistic perception of life, develop personal skills, and make a commitment to some type of work. And number 5, mature adults have a sense of humor and self-objectification, or an understanding of or insight into the self. Number 6, mature adults subscribe to a unifying philosophy of life, which is responsible for directing the personality towards future goals. By meeting these 6 criteria, adults can be described as emotionally healthy and functionally autonomous, independent of childhood motives. Questions about human nature. Alport's view of functional autonomy and personality development holds that emotionally healthy adults are not tied to or driven by childhood conflicts. Thus, his theory presents an optimistic view of adults in conscious control of their lives. Rationally attending to current situations, planning for the future, and actively fashioning an identity, Alport's optimistic image of human nature was reflected in his personal liberal stance and his interest in social reform. To Alport, the ultimate and necessary goal of life is not to reduce tension, as Freud proposed, but rather to increase tension, impelling us to continually seek new sensations and challenges. When we have met one challenge, we are motivated to seek another. The reward is the process of achieving rather than the specific achievements, striving for the goal rather than reaching it. Assessment in Alport's theory. Alport wrote more about personality assessment techniques than most other theorists did. According to Alport, personality is so complex that to evaluate it, we must employ many techniques. He listed 11 major methods. Constitutional and physiological diagnosis, which refers to us developing an accurate diagnostic method based on vocal and facial features or individual's physical characteristic. Cultural settings, membership role, personal documents and case studies, self-appraisal or evaluation of one's own strengths and weaknesses, conduct analysis, ratings, tests and scales, which refers to us assessing or measuring about specific concerns. Projective techniques that are normally used to infer about motives or intentions which cannot be secured through direct questioning. Depth analysis, or a type of technique that are open to the exploration of subtle, unconscious, and transpersonal aspects of human experience. Expressive behavior, and hypnotic procedures, which means combining information from several sources in his hypnosis. Alport relied heavily on the personal document technique and the study of values. He also observed expressive behavior.
The importance of the infant-mother bond. If mother provides sufficient affection and security, the proprium will develop gradually and steadily. It is because our social interactions with our parents is important throughout all the stages of development of the proprium. Without it, the needs of the childhood will be frustrated and self will not mature properly. That's why madaming lumalaking batang aggressive, demanding, self-centered, and jealous. Kasi kulang na kulang yung interactions and guide ng mga magulang sa bata. That's why if they are provided a sufficient affection and security, it will form and result will be a mature emotionally and healthy adult. So, dapat kailangan talaga na magkaroon tayo ng interaction sa mga magulang natin kasi kapag wala yun, magiging neurotic adult tayo na magkakaroon tayo ng mga childhood drives. For example, nung bata tayo, hindi tayo nabibigyan ng toys, hindi tayo nabibigyan ng mga masasarap na pagkain. Ang mangyayari niya, pagtanda natin, doon natin i-fulfill yung mga hindi natin nakuha nung bata tayo. Like parang magiging coping mechanism natin yung pagkakaroon na mga bagay na yon nung nawala tayo nung bata tayo. So, sa research on Alport's theory, Gordon Alport criticized those psychologists who insisted that experimental and correlational methods were the only legitimate ways to find the study of personality. Sabi pa niya na he opposed applying methods used with the emotionally disturbed to the study emotionally healthy people kasi nga yung case study is focused only on the past, that he considered them as a no value for understanding normal adults because their personality is divorced from childhood influences. So he argued that projective techniques such as a thematic perception test and Rorschach ink blot test may represent distorted picture of natural personality because they deal with unconscious forces that have a little effect on the normal adult personality. Kaya sinadjust niya na lang na mas kumuha na lang na reliable information that could be obtained by simply asking people to describe themselves. Kasi yung method na yun, mas makikita yung dominant trait ng isang tao.
Expressive behavior is spontaneous and seemingly purposeless behavior, usually displayed without or conscious awareness.
Expressive behavior. Alport conducted a considerable research on what he called expressive behavior that describes behavior that expresses our personality traits.
Coping behavior. Consciously planned behavior determined by the need of given situation and designed for a specific purpose, usually to bring about a change in one's environment.
He also identified coping behavior which is oriented toward a specific purpose and is consciously planned and carried out. The nature of expressive behavior. Expressive behavior is spontaneous and reflects basic aspects of personality. In contrast to coping behavior, expressive behavior is difficult to change and has no specific purpose and is usually displayed without our awareness. For example, is public speaking, di ba? Yung speaker communicates to the audience. So, there are two levels. So, yung formal tsaka informal. So, formal or coping behavior, it includes the lecture's content. So, ba't nasabi natin na sa coping behavior siya? It is because planned na yung paggawa niya ng content na sasabihin niya sa public. Kumbaga, nasulat niya na kung ano yung mga sasabihin niya, nasasabihin niya na lang sa public. So, next is yung informal or expressive behavior. It includes the gesture movements or voice inflections. It was called expressive behavior kasi it was unplanned level. So, meaning, it is difficult to change and also it has no specific purpose and usually displayed without our awareness. Kasi nga po, minsan, di ba, kapag nagsasalita tayo, syempre, hindi natin maiwasan maging nervous, hindi natin maiwasan mag-stutter habang nagsasalita. That's why it was called unplanned level because we are unconsciously na ginagawa natin yung mga bagay na yun.
Effects of gender and age. Women and younger people are better at recognizing emotions in facial expressions than men and older people. Ability of children to read facial expression can occur as early as the age of 5 and improve rapidly thereafter. An analysis of yearbook photograph of women college graduates found that those who exhibit positive emotional expression at age 21 scored higher on self-report inventories of subjective well-being. Coding facial expression. A long-term research program conducted by Paul Ekman identified facial expression of 7 emotions. These are anger,
contempt, disgust, fear, sadness, surprise, and happiness. Other research have also shown that some basic aspects of personality are revealed by facial expressions. For example, neuroticism reveals itself in look of anger, contempt, and fear. Agreeableness show in laughter, and other expressions of friendly social interactions. Emotional states and facial expressions. Type A behavior. The pattern suggested to be associated with potential for heart disease has been distinguished from type B behavior. Yung type B behavior po, yun yung expression of disgust, glaring, grimace, and scowling. Research on Japanese college students found that those who scored high on the test of anxiety exhibited different facial expressions. Lalo-lalo na pa yung mouth nila tsaka yung gilid ng face nila, madami po silang pinapakitang facial expressions kesa dun sa mga nakascore ng low sa anxiety test. This result on research on Japanese college students confirm Alport's ideas. Cultural differences in facial expressions. Some basic emotions are revealed by identical facial expressions in both cultures and in both age groups. A study comparing facial expressions of American, Chinese, and Japanese infants reached a different conclusion. The researchers noted that this result suggests that perceptions of emotion may not be universal. Research involving adults in the United States and Japan showed that each group was much better at recognizing facial expression of people of their own culture. The same cultural differences were found when subjects were shown different faces on robots. So, people in Eastern culture are more likely to use their eyes to express emotions, while those in Western cultures use their eyebrows and mouth to express feelings. Computer recognition of facial expressions. A computer program has been developed that monitors video images of faces at the rate of 30 frames per second. The computer achieved a high degree of accuracy in recognizing basic emotions including happiness, sadness, fear, disgust, anger, and surprise. Panahon natin ngayon, we use emoticons to show our emotions in computer-mediated communication, similar in a way in face-to-face situation. And also, emoticons were used to study the online transmission of personal feelings. That is why the teenagers were found to use more emoticons in their communication in social context than in a task or job-oriented context. Reflections on Alport's theory. Alport's approach to psychology was at variance with the prevalent position in clinical psychology, which dealt with the neurotic and psychotic. Although considerable research has been conducted on expressive behavior, Alport's theory as a whole has stimulated a little research to test its propositions. Questions and criticisms. Criticisms have been leveled against the concept of functional autonomy. Alport did not make clear how an original motive is transformed into an autonomous one. For example, once a person is financially secure, by what process is the motive to work hard for financial gain altered to become a motive to continue to work hard for the sake of the task itself? That is why many psychologists find it difficult to accept Alport's proposed discontinuity between child and adult, animal and human, normal and abnormal. They point out that research on the behavior of children, animals, and emotionally disturbed subjects has yielded considerable knowledge about the functioning of the normal and emotional healthy adult. Recognition and influence. Alport's major work on the expression of emotions has been of vital importance in the development of the field of cognitive neuroscience. His emphasis on conscious rational determinants of behavior provides an alternative to the psychoanalytic position. And because of that, Alport's view that people are shaped more by future expectation than by past events is congenial with a hopeful and humanistic philosophy. His most enduring contribution to psychology are making the study of personality academically respectable and emphasizing the role of genetic factors within a trait approach to personality.